thank you for your kind welcome and invitation, and also to Dr. Knox as well for setting this whole venture up today. I'm more than delighted to be here, and I bring greetings to everyone present from the great state of California and the great city of San Francisco. I'm going to go ahead and begin. Let me share my screen. Hang on. Okay. Is everyone able to see that, please? Okay, terrific. Okay, we're going to go ahead and begin. And so we'll start at the beginning. I was giving my background a little bit to one of our members earlier, but I'll just give this to you again. I'm born and raised in the Bronx, New York. Both I had the great pleasure of having two parents who were civil rights workers. They did this after attending college, and even though um, as children and young adults, my brother and I didn't understand the value of their work and their passion, but later on we definitely got it. As Dr. Rope mentioned earlier, I attended HBCU Johnson C. Smith University, where I had a wonderful time, and I believe the value of being in that environment was being surrounded by like-minded students and also faculty members who were engaged in civil rights, social justice matters. I do believe if I have any success at all, I I credit Johnson C. Smith with where I am today because I'm truly grateful for that experience. So let's start with just a basic social equity definition. Social equity is the fair and just and equitable manner in which institutions, specifically public institutions, uh, have a commitment to fairness, justice, and the like. And this is all that we're talking about basically with social equity. And it's a um, I think a new term for some. We're very much accustomed to DEI and such. And if we had another couple of hours, we would unpack that. However, specifically regarding social equity, it really is about fairness. And I'm so pleased to say that after 3 years of being a full-time faculty, that I am considered a social equity scholar. I came into my career with that as the on the top of my agenda, research agenda. So it's something I've been committed to, a topic I've been committed to for quite some time. I'm a very visual person, so you'll see a lot of sort of visual slides for folks who are also visual. So these are the topics that we are concerned with in social equity, whether they be race, uh, gender inequality, um, sexual orientation, LGBT areas, age, color, and I think particularly age, because as I tend to get a little bit older, I'm acutely aware that how age plays out in our society. And so these are the areas that we're concerned with. We're concerned with rights for everyone, right? I just wanted to alert you, I wouldn't be a good scholar if I did not bring up some books that we have that several of my colleagues in the field of public administration and policy have done over the years. And those of you who are from Virginia, Dr. Gooden has done a wonderful book on race and social equity. She's the dean at Virginia Commonwealth University. And then we have Dr. Naylor, who just spoke at my class last week. She's a professor at the University of Baltimore, and she's a LGBT plus ally, and has written a couple of books on uh, the the um, the impact that state and regional and local legislation, and certainly federal legislation, has on the LGBT community. That's I think very exciting. And again, having allies for any of our groups is important. this is a book that the next one, just very briefly, is one that I did with my colleagues um, a few years ago, teaching college students communication strategies for effective social advocacy and so forth with Robert James and Dr. Murray. So anyway, my point for putting this here is to let you know that oftentimes people say, "Oh, social equity, it's one of those, soft skills, fluffy," but it's actually quite it holds quite the bastion of scholarship and is growing as well. Final note on scholarship: if any of you are scholars and what are interested in writing or editing a book, I am the book series editor for public administration and social equity within the International Age uh, publishing house. So if you're interested, please contact me. Would love to discuss the potential of you doing a book project for IAP. Again, another visualization. So as we can see here on the screen, right on the left, everything being equal, but the youngster on the right of that screen can't see. When we talk about equity, we ensure that everyone can see over the fence and has access to the baseball game that they're looking at. Here we have, I have this here because it's important for us to think about frontline workers. So these individuals that risk their lives for us, even in terms of, I know a number of us participate in food delivery services. I myself uh, do that on occasion, and it's always exciting to when that food comes and, but we don't necessarily think about the person bringing it. So we just want to, in our consciousness as much as possible, we want to ensure that all of these folks are receiving, uh, certainly we want to make sure that they're receiving a livable wage, but we also want to make sure that they are in conditions that are favorable to them. My mother is a teacher of youngsters, elementary school. So therefore, teachers that's a big thing for me. I'm always big on making sure that we advocate for our teachers in this country and the fact that without getting uh, political or anything like that, I think our teachers are some of our best resources in the world, not just the country, but certainly in the world. And but yet their pay and working conditions don't demonstrate that. So that's what I'll say to that. Anyway, you get my point here. We just want to make, these are just examples, some examples of individuals who do the heavy lifting for us. Again, social equity is concerned with access, right? That's what we're talking about here, access. So if we look at both examples on the screen, we will see on the left the lavishly sort of furnished room, and to someone unfamiliar with social equity, they might say, "Oh, that room is done, it's appointed very well, albeit the furniture is close together." But still, it looks like a very nice living room. But well, the issue is it doesn't provide access to someone who has a disability. And that person doesn't necessarily need to be in a wheelchair. There are other disabilities that would limit someone's mobility with that type of room construction. Right. And then we will see on the next screen the the scaffolding around this building that's being built. But again, we don't see necessarily any type of access for people with handicaps and disabilities. And this is what we want to go forward. We part of social equity teaches us to look at things with a critical eye, right? And we look at things with a critical eye, not just in terms of how we're benefiting uh, from what we're looking at, but how someone else might not benefit from. So we want to ask those questions, right? Why isn't like for example, the room on the left, why isn't the room spaced out more so that people can get in and out of from around the furniture? Okay. So neutrality is not neutral, right? So this is big in social equity because that as we say here on the screen, neutrality hands advantage to those who are already advantaged. And so something I would like for all of us to take away from the lecture today is that we all come to the table with some type of advantage. My dear friend and colleague, Dr. Nash, who wrote the book with me about student strategy some years ago. Uh, I love Robert to death. However, Robert is a very tall Caucasian gentleman, a little bit older now. He's in his early to mid 80s, but Robert doesn't believe that he has any advantages because he grew up in a foster care system in Boston, and so for him that takes away any advantages that he might have had. Well, the truth of the matter is that, it doesn't. I mean, he's still a white male in our society that values white males, right? And specifically a tall white male. So, but it's so interesting. He and I have had these conversations over the years that and I try to get him to embrace his uh his advantages, right? And he doesn't. And I think that's one of the issues when we don't embrace the advantages that we all come to the table with, right? Then we get stuck and we become defensive. And that's not what we're going to do. We want to say, these are the advantages I bring. Let me help someone else to have some advantages, or at least to have an equal um an equitable playing field, right? So we'll go on. So this is again just another sort of concept, but I think it's true, the little cartoon, right? Because I do believe in a number of organizations, especially ones that I'm called upon uh, to provide consultation with. There is this myth or this thinking that if we don't do anything, it'll just work out. I think there's less of that at universities and colleges and more of this with sort of smaller nonprofits, right? And that's not to castigate small nonprofits or nonprofits generally, because they do the heavy lifting, not only in the US, but around the world as well. Uh, but, and I can kind of understand it, right? There's so many things that have to be done uh, within an organization, particularly if you have a small staff. So just thinking, well, maybe it'll all work out would be a thinking, right? But it really isn't. It doesn't do much at all to advance social equity. But uh, it there is some, and maybe some of you know some organizations or some managers or supervisors who really just kind of believe that things happen um, just kind of magically on their own, and we know that's not the case at all. Okay, so I always believe in accountability, right? Make folks accountable. And this is what I always tell my friends who are not of color, right? That they too have a part to play in social equity, right? Everyone has a part to play. And I think that at least the research demonstrates that when you call people on their stuff and you say you can't sit on the sidelines and let other people do this work, because I will tell you honestly, uh again, I've been a full-time faculty member for the last uh almost 25 years of my life, and 11 of those years were I was tenured at the University of Vermont, which was a wonderful experience. Vermont is very forward thinking. But then I was recruited to USF with a lot more money, thank goodness. Vermont paid okay, but California pays better, and California also has better weather. So, much to the chagrin of my colleagues at University of Vermont, I'd love to come here. But in both situations, at both institutions, the lift is heavy for faculty of color. And I will just be very candid with you in saying that. It's a very heavy lift when we talk about matters of social equity and DEI and everything else like that, because all of that stuff is expected to fall primarily on us. And I will tell you, I get tired many days. I keep going, but it's exhausting. That's why we need everyone to share in the lift, because it is heavy at times, and it's a lot to bear. So criteria for social equity, right? Procedural fairness, right? That I think that's pretty straightforward. Due process, transparency, equal rights, representation, right? Access, as I was mentioning before, right? Who has access to participate in processes and programs, specifically around the workplace or the school place, like the university, college place, right? Uh, Quality, right? We want to make sure that processes and programs meet standards. Social equity is not about limiting standards. Social equity is about enforcing standards. This is why earlier, when my dear friend and colleague Suzanne mentioned that she gave the eligibility for to start a Pi Gamma Mu chapter, and she mentioned, and sagely so, that um, you have to be at a university or college, of course, that's accredited. One of the things we do know about accreditation bodies, generally speaking, is that they ensure that there's a standard by which every program or every university is measured by, right? And sometimes those standards could be a little bit off and not necessarily fair to one university versus another, but at least there is that equitable standard. And so that's something we strive for. Outcomes, I have here public services. Um, and we want to make sure that in all of our public services, whether they be at the federal, state, or regional level, we want to make sure that our agencies are doing due diligence by everyone, right? We don't want them to, look at a situation by situation and say, well, this person or this community is not deserving. So in other words, if community A has their garbage picked up on Wednesday, then community C should have their garbage also picked up sometime during that week. It may not necessarily be on the same day as A, but as long as their garbage is picked up on a regular basis. Okay. So here's something that I'm called to speak about upon a great deal, right? This is happening at a number of universities, happening at my university, University of San Francisco, which I enjoy being here. I've been here almost 15 years at USF. It's a great place to be. And so USF, like a number of universities, they are uh, renaming buildings, right? And also tearing down statues and renaming streets, right, to get away from uh, individuals who were considered racist or what have you, right? Abominable. However, the issue is not so much that, and I'm thrilled that that's happening. However, the bigger issue is still systematic racism, right? That is what people are not tackling, right? That's the elephant in the room. And so again, the other strategies that we're doing, the renaming of places and things, that's good. That's good. Let's continue where appropriate. However, the bigger picture is uh, the systematic racism that's in place. So I think I would encourage each of you on this call today to think about um, the sort of what I would consider the invisible systematic racism, because it's not, we don't live in the days of where people will blatantly use the N-word or blatantly or publicly uh, call someone an offensive term necessarily, right? Uh, uh, and so we're not talking about that category of folks. We're talking about systems that prevent people of color from climbing higher in organizations. We're talking about systems that prevent women from breaking through that glass ceiling. We're talking about systems that prevent people who are in the LGBT community from living their truth within the organization that they work for and excelling. So these are the types of things that we're talking about. Uh, Not just systematic racism, but certainly all of the other isms that are out there that need to be dismantled. And so we're going to come to the end shortly here, so that I want to make sure I leave some time for questions. But here, this is just another visualization of what happens when uh, there's no equity, right? And what happens when there's equity and justice. So, one of the important things is to make sure that people are at the table. Their ability to make decisions, to help inform decisions. This is something that I think a lot of institutions and organizations don't get right, right? They come up, and of course I'm painting a broad brush here, but they feel that decisions being made by a small group of people is the way to go. Well, I mean, not really, because if it's impacting everyone, particularly those disenfranchised groups, then that's a problem. So, think about being at the table. And I learned this a long time ago from a dear friend and colleague, Dr. Wanda Heading Grant, who was at the University of Vermont as the vice president for diversity and inclusion. She's now at Carnegie Mellon University, still continuing with that same work. But I remember she taught me early in my career as a new assistant professor in about 2001 or 2002 or so, that unless you're at the table, particularly as a person of color or as again from another marginalized group, then your voice is not being heard. And so and I thank her for that lesson, and a shout out to her if she's listening somehow to this talk. But I always try to make sure that I have a seat at the table. And again, as I mentioned before, that's exhausting. It's exhausting work. It's exhausting work just being a professor and teaching classes and being on the hundreds of committees that we have to be on as faculty members and also doing the research. It's exhausting making sure that we are at yet another table. But if we're not, the results could be catastrophic. And I say that not dramatically, but it's true because decisions are being made about each of us on this call. Decisions are being made now that we may not be aware of, and unless we are at the table, we may not necessarily know what's going on, and uh, we may not know that the person speaking at the table is speaking for us. So that's what we're talking about here. The levers, right? The levers are a mechanism in which we can get things done. So I spoke about Dr. Naylor earlier, who is an ally for the LGBT community. She's a social equity scholar within the field of public administration policy, grade aid faculty at the University of Vermont, right? She is an example of an advocate, right, and an ally for that community and just communities generally. She's that person, right? We attend to feedback, another level, appreciate power of effective rules, right? Um, alert, be alert to inherent privilege, which is again what I talked about with Dr. Robert Nash, who did not want to acknowledge his privilege because to him that was all negated because of his background, having grown up um, in a foster home. I'm sorry, not a foster home. It was an orphanage, right? However, despite those circumstances, which would be tough for anyone, he went on to receive a PhD from a top university and also become a university professor. So, you know, there's that. Uh, Another level, we want folks to be accountable and responsible, right? We should all have that in mind. So, and I'll just run through this quickly. Going back to being at the table, we want to notice who's not at the table, right? That's the issue, right? Who's not here that should be here? And this is something that I don't think folks, again, fact, I'm going to speak about faculty because that's what I am. Um, we have to engage in so many committees that I don't think sometimes faculty realize, well, this person should be here or this person shouldn't be here. Having said that, I will say though that one of my greatest joys is working with Pi Gamma Mu. I've worked with Pi Gamma Mu for years, and it brings me a great sense of privilege and pride. And to work with my colleagues that I have here on the call, that's good work, right? That's good work. That's not a heavy lifting, the way that some of my other committees are. So I thank Pi Gamma Mu for again having me here today. Um, you know, um, we certainly want to be sensitive to views uh, that predominate the room, but if the views are wrong, then we want to call those views out, right? Let's just go on because I'm acutely aware that time is getting away from us. Again, these are personal freedoms, LGBT rights, as I just mentioned, environmental justice. I will also say that um, I am a proud vegan, 15 years, and so that is important to me, right? And I would, um, not like it if someone were to try to disenfranchise me because of being a vegan, right? And some of you may be vegans on the call or vegetarians or pescatarians and so forth. Again, just we want to go when we talk about being at the table, we want to act like I tell my students, I don't want them to sit, and these are graduate students, I don't want them to sit in class and just be passive. I want them to be an active listener, right? Because when you're an active listener, you do more than just take up seat space. You're engaged in a conversation. There's uh that 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 acuteness that's turned on by what's being said. And so that's why I have this here. We want to be we when we're at the table. So there's one thing to be at the table. There's another thing to listen to what folks are saying at the table. Work plan, crucial conversations again, reconciliation, sensitivity to others. This is the America that we want to have, that we should be having, harmonious diversity, right? Uh, I'm just going to sum this up. Be the change, right? But the University of San Francisco has this motto, so I actually have borrowed it from them. Be the change you want to be. And for those of you who don't know, University of San Francisco is a Jesuit university founded in 1866, and it prides itself on social equity. Um, and some things we get right and some things we don't get right. But I believe that there's a genuine effort, hopefully, by everyone to make things better. With that, I thank you for your time. Thank you, Suzanne and Allison.
Thank you so very much for speaking with us today about this really important issue. Um, I have a question for you, if that's okay.
Of course, please. You can have two if you like.
Two. Um, out of there are so many important pieces of social equity when it comes to all sorts of different government programs and policies. If there was one thing you think we could do, just as citizens, What do you think that might be to kind of help with making things equal in our society?
That's such a pivotal question, right? I, and there's so many things I can think of sort of knee jerk, but what really comes to mind is pay attention. Right? Pay attention who's not speaking around you, who doesn't have a voice. Like I would say, one of the reasons I became a social equity scholar is to provide voice to communities that don't have voice, right? So for example, it's interesting because I have a brother who's 9 months younger than I am, and he did not do the college path that I did. He did a different route. And though his life is I think pretty good, he's married and lives in New York, and but I want his voice to be heard as well. You know, just because he may not have the trappings of higher education doesn't mean that he and others like him should be tossed aside. Um, so yes, let's pay attention to those that are not speaking, or to those who don't have a voice. Let's try to make things happen on their behalf as well.
That's excellent. Thank you. I think I'll probably think more about that too. It's sometimes I think it's hard to think about, we see all these different problems in society. We see all these different things that we really want to see change, but
Mhm.
sometimes we don't really know where to start, right? So I think it's important
Yeah.
to, certainly with your points about, oh, this is Kieran.
Hey,
He's
Karen.
interested too.
Oh, that's cool. How do you spell his name?
Ciaran.
Awesome.
It's the Gaelic spelling.
Well, maybe he'll
Um,
be a social equity scholar someday.
he very well might be. He very well
Yeah,
might be.
that's awesome.
Do we have any other questions for Dr. Johnson?
I, I have a question. Hi, I'm
Vivian?
Vivian Mason. I'm in Vermont, and it's such a joy to see you, Richard.
Oh my God,
I just can't tell you.
Vivian.
I know,
Oh,
yes. How are
how are
you?
you doing?
I'm good. I'm good. It's so wonderful to see. I just want to give you a hug.
Oh my
You,
God,
you, you,
this has made my day.
this has made my
Wow.
day. I canceled my afternoon for this.
Oh my
I, this is
God.
this is so
This
wonderful.
is a small Vivian is a member of Pi Gamma Mu and one of my dearest friends. And but then you know how it is, you move across country and sometimes you lose contact with people. And um Vivian, this is just I
This
can't
is
excited.
It's
Wow.
amazing. It is. But
Wow. Hey, you're looking great as always.
oh,
So
you
yeah,
know, that's the ageism stuff. Yeah. I mean, white hair,
yeah.
people
Well,
think that
you you
it's
wear
it's
well.
alive and well. Ageism
Yes,
is alive and well,
yes,
all the isms are, you know.
yes, that's right.
And you know my story.
I
But the
let's
thing is,
connect offline. I would love to do that.
I
Oh
would
my,
love to also. I would love to. But I do have a question actually,
yes.
because you just inspire me so much. I just want to get out and
Oh.
go downtown Burlington and say, "Don't you hear what Dr. Johnson's saying?" um, uh, there are so many. First of all, what what gets me so upset about social justice is that mostly we're preaching to the choir. And when we're not preaching to the choir, which is the work that, as you know, Susan and I we did with our conversation on race, we started
Yes,
that before Black Lives Mattered. Not that it
that's
matters
right.
what started which first, but we did so
Yes,
much work on that.
that's right.
And we would salivate when people came who didn't agree with us, because those are
Yeah,
the voices we want to hear.
that's
And if
right.
out of 100 people there was one takeaway that somebody thought, maybe I can think a little differently about it, that was successful.
Well, that's
How do
right.
we do that? It's so frustrating. We do the work, and it's meaningful, and it's the right thing to do. Sometimes it's just so frustrating, because I personally believe social justice could be the answer to all the problems in the world. I mean, I know
Yes.
that's a radical statement, but I believe that to be true.
Yeah, I agree. I
Yeah.
agree. And I thank you for for you and Susan doing the heavy lifting. You know, you guys have been on the front lines for some years. And in fact, I seem to remember that we did something with your local synagogue and some people in the Black community, and that was in Vermont, right? Little Vermont, right?
Yes, Vermont.
With things like this of conscious people conscious live in Vermont. And I will always, someone just asked me yesterday, in fact, and this is not quite what you were asking about, but I'm going to say, so someone one of my buddies just asked me yesterday, you know, of all the places I've lived in the country, which would be the is the best? Well, it's like, you know, talking about your children, right? Who's your best child? You dare not say anything, right? But I will say, all things being equal, I would have to say Vermont was one of them. I'm going to put California on the list because I'm here now as well. But I loved Vermont. That's where I grew up as an academic. It's where I developed a social equity lens, and so you know, I really think that Vermont is people like you. You're doing the heavy lifting in Vermont, right? It's not easy. Yeah, I was mentioning that to you before, Vivian, because you and I have had many conversations about how exhausting the work is. But the question is, if not you, then who?
Who?
Right? That's the issue, right? When we get tired, we have to ask ourselves, if not us, right, then who will do it? And that's a frightening thought, right? So I encourage you to keep it up. I know you're exhausted, but you know, hopefully your son is there helping you.
I don't want to take up much time, but I just want to say I'm a grandmother of two biracial children now.
Oh my goodness.
They're wonderful. And you know what? My heart hurts
Wow.
for what
Mm-hmm.
for the
Yes.
journey that they have no idea. But we talk to them like
Yes.
they're adults because
Yeah.
they have to carry a lot with them through this world.
Well,
And
with a grandmother like you and a father like their son,
yeah,
they'll get the message and they will be okay. So,
thank you.
but
Felt good to
make
be.
sure you get my cell number, okay?
I did. I did. Thank you.
Okay.
Professor Johnson,
Yes.
uh,
I, I'm sorry. Now
Gordon,
that I've spoken with Vivian, I'm all clipped.
But Clem,
Professor
Uh,
Johnson, I had a
yes.
question for you. It takes us a little bit out of the dimensions of your presentation, but realistically, we are having on a lot of campuses across the United States demonstrations right now related to the Palestinian situation. So, if you could imagine yourself as president of a major university in the United States, and you were dealing with, some of the difficulties now on campuses, and you wanted to approach it in terms of a socially equitable way. But at the same time, as president, you've got political worries. You've
Mm-hmm.
got all kind of worries, and of course, you've got the worries of how to work with the local police or not work with the local police. Give us some insights. If you hypothetically were president of the university, dealing with some of the difficulties that we're dealing with on campus, but very committed to equity,
Mm-hmm.
how would you handle some of these situations?
Thank you so much. I think that's a great question. And perhaps you're speaking something into existence, you know, for my future, right? President
Right,
of the
right.
university. I like that. I like that. My understanding of these situations is to always listen, and to listen to the protesters, right? And something not to do is call the police and other law enforcement officers that will come in and assault people and arrest people. That I believe that is the wrong tactic. And so, you know, I think everyone, of course, has his side to take and a story to tell, you know, but what would happen if we got all of the protesters together to actually have a conversation, right? I mean, as Pollyannish as that may sound, those things still work. And so, for example, at the University of San Francisco, we're also having protesters as well. But our president, who is a Jesuit priest, has taken the position that that he and others will meet with the protesters and talk with the protesters and assure them that there won't be any retaliation uh, because of their actions. And again, I'm from a protest background, so perhaps Gordon, you're asking the wrong person because I say protest regardless of what you're protesting, as long as you are doing it from a sincere place and you have um a conscious about why you're doing what you're doing, then you know um I say go forward. Again, not so we're talking about peaceful protests. We're not talking about protests where folks are destroying things. That's I think completely unacceptable. So yeah. So that's all I'll say about that right now.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for the question.
I think we have a question from Ella. Forgive me if I'm saying your name incorrectly.
Yes, thank you very much. I have a question. It's a question about strategy because I've seen a change in my short lifetime. I don't think we're moving forward. I think we're moving backward.
Mm,
And so, for example, in this presentation, it seemed like there was a baseline acceptance that equity is a good thing. The question is how to achieve it.
mhm,
And I'm living in a small town in a rural area where there is
mm,
not agreement that equity is a good thing.
mhm,
Since 2020, I've made much more of an effort to do the work. And so I've committed to going to town council meetings every
mm,
month. And our town council explicitly made a move to erase equity from the comprehensive development plan and
mhm,
replace it with equality. They thought equity was too socialist and blah, blah, blah.
mm,
So,
mm,
and also I'm in an area that sent busloads of people to Washington, D.C. on January 6th. I mean, I'm
mhm.
in a place where white supremacy is
Wow.
visible, loud,
Yeah.
arrogant, in your face, Confederate flags, that kind of thing. And I'm in the North. So
Really?
my
Wow.
question, or what I find myself thinking about, are the strategies, not that people used 10 years ago, but what strategies did they use 30 years ago, 40
Mhm,
years ago, 50 years ago? I have talked to Black brothers and sisters in this area who have said that they feel like they're living in the Selma of the North.
mm.
And
Wow.
so my question is, given that context where people have legitimate existential,
Yeah.
like are facing an existential threat, I feel like I have to change my strategies. I feel
Mm,
like, I mean, I don't want to say that I want to be more militant, but I feel like I'm operating in an environment now that is different. I have seen a visible change,
mhm.
and maybe I'm just naive. Maybe it's always been this way,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
I really feel like in the past 10 years, I've really seen a
Yeah.
shift backwards, at least in my area. And so I'm interested in hearing from people like you who are very experienced,
Mhm,
who have a lot of wisdom and maybe can share some of the strategies that people had to use when this country was
mhm,
not on board with
mhm.
progress, with equity, with all that kind of stuff.
Yes. Wow. That is quite the experience you're having. And without having you divulge exactly where you are, it's troubling to think that it's up north, right? In the Northeast. But what we do know is that you know, people, regardless of what part of the country they're in, uh, don't get it right, and they don't see the bigger picture, right? And they don't see progress. And so, oftentimes, I find one of the key strategies, at least in my experiences, around education, right?
Mm,
Because sometimes people don't know what they don't know. They don't know that we conflate both equality and equity together, and those are two very different things, right? As we saw in the presentation. But this is what I would say to you, Ella, really. This is why allies are so important,
mm,
right? If you don't have allies in the town that you live in, you may very well have to import allies.
mm.
That's not to suggest that they have to stay in your town, but no one person can make the change. So I was talking with my dear friend Vivian earlier, as we saw, right? And Vivian can't do all of this heavy lifting in Vermont by herself or with one of her girlfriends, Susan. You you just can't. You need to have other people that you can say, this is crazy and it sucks and I need your help, right? I think that's one of the key things because then you don't feel as lonely going through this, right? Being the voice of reason. But also, I'm so pleased to hear that you're going to city council meetings now, right? Or I'm sorry that I
Yeah.
forgot to say, by city council, because perhaps you can say to them, you know, you guys don't have this right. Bring in uh someone who can talk to us about moving forward. Because if you're feeling that they're moving backwards, that's a problem, right? That's a problem. That's not what we want. We want to go forward. And but again, it can't be just your voice. It's going to be the voice of many. And that is one of the key strategies. Though I do think having a big mouth and being heard is important, right? And somehow I feel that you can take that. I'm not saying you have a big mouth. I'm saying that I believe you have a lot to say that can impact these people. So I say that go forward with that strategy, and if I can be of assistance, you have my contact, and I'm more than happy to help you out. Okay,
Dr. Johnson,
ma'am, how are you?
son, a fellow Tar Heel for a period of time.
Oh, there you go. God, okay.
North Carolina Central in Durham.
Oh, okay. All right.
Okay.
Love it.
Still have
Love
family
it.
in Charlotte. Well,
Oh,
I've often wondered what could we as citizens say to our individuals in Congress that we supposedly elected?
hmm,
What could we say to them that would encourage them to have a little bit more of common sense
hmm,
and think as children before they're tainted by prejudice?
hmm,
And how could we possibly get the community together and attend meetings, as Ella
hmm,
said, to think
hmm,
that
hmm, hmm,
we have a stake in the community and to feel that we have to do something if we want to live in some type of harmony in the
hmm.
world?
Yeah. I think that's such a great question. So in terms of getting the attention of these folks in Congress, I think we have to kind of go through the back door sometimes and use our affinity groups. So, for example, the Congressional Black Caucus, right? And other caucuses that we have there, because they have more of an entry to the broader Congress than just a layperson, right? So I try to go to Black Caucus meetings. They happen every fall, and almost anyone can attend. And you take people by the hand, and you lead them over to a corner someplace, and you let them know you have some concerns that you want them to take up, right? I think that's one of the easiest methods. Um, you know, I- I'm gonna talk about my fraternity for a second, right? Because the alphas and all of the Divine Nine organizations, as you probably know, we have a Hill Day where we go to the Capitol Hill, right? And we make our concerns known there. So again, not one person can do this. I think it's going to take a collective. This is where our collective voices are heard. But in terms of people in the community, um, and so I'm a product. I must admit I've not done this myself. I keep saying I'm going to run for city council in the town that I live in in northern uh California. However, work gets in the way, family gets in the way, blah, 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 and you just don't have time, right? But so I'm really speaking to myself as well when I speak to you about this, that, sometimes you got to push people out of their comfort zone to do these various things, regardless of how small it is. And, oftentimes people will say, what I can do, what I have time to do doesn't count. It all counts. It all counts, particularly if you're trying to make some type of change. And I'm sure I've lived in the town that I've lived in for almost 15 years. I'm sure these folks don't know who I am, generally speaking, and they don't care about me and they blah blah blah. However, I still need to show up and be counted. And I think we all have that responsibility. So hopefully the next time I see you, I will be able to tell you I've, run for city council or I've joined a community impact group or something like that, because I do think those things are important, even though we get tired. That's the issue, right? I mean, we only have a certain amount of energy, but at the same time, again, I say if not us, then who? So that's what I would say. I hope that was okay. Go Tar Heels. And I have a little cousin at NCCU right now, so try to make sure he pledges out for. So, oh, thank you.
Do we have any
Thank
other
you.
questions for Dr. Johnson?
Thank you.
Right, great
Yes,
question.
thank you so much, Dr. Johnson, for this wonderful presentation. I think you said it so well. We need to work together. That's a theme we're seeing emerge this year at Pi Gamma Mu as we move towards our convention. We will have a social equity project at the convention. We aren't sure exactly what that's going to look like yet, but our goal is to help our members think about the importance of all the different disciplines working together, because like you said, none of us can do it alone. It really is an effort that is going to take all of us from various disciplines. So well said, Professor
Thank you
Johnson. Thank you for that.
much.
And on the local level, we tend to forget that in terms of politics, we need to be well aware of what's going on in our communities and to vote, even for the dog
Yeah,
catcher,
I
even
agree.
for the dog catcher, and move
That's right.
up and continue to participate and vote. Get involved
That's
because,
right.
as you said, if we don't do it, who? And if you
Who
don't
will?
vote, you've tacitly given up rights, your right to vote, your right to
Hmm.
do any and everything.
That's
And
right.
if we sit back and do nothing, no one else is going to do it for you.
I agree. Absolutely. And you heard me talk about my brother earlier. My brother was probably, even though we had parents that worked as civil rights workers, he was one of the most non-community oriented people ever. But somehow along the line, he grew up. And now when I speak to him, we're having conversations about his involvement with this civic group in the Bronx and that civic group. And, he's like, well, did you hear that this person is running for office? I'm like, what the heck? Like, this is like, what happened? Someplace along the line that light bulb went off and he's a different person. And for that, I'm grateful. Maybe he's seeing what I do, how I lead my life in terms of being civic minded and trying to make a change. And maybe that's rubbed off on him, maybe not, because he's been very opposite from me my whole life, but as brothers tend to be sometimes. But I'm so pleased that he he gets it now. He understands the value of voting, and the value of being a change agent. So yes, absolutely agree with you. So
Well, wonderful.
yeah,
Thank you again for that, Dr. Johnson.
thank you, Dr. Volpe. It's been a great
Uh,
pleasure being here. So
we greatly appreciate it. You have reached probably a dozen different states in our country, and I see at least one attendee, Professor Padata, is here from the Philippines. So
oh,
the reach,
wonderful.
yes, the reach of this presentation today is great, and we appreciate you. We
Yes.
have recorded this, and we'll put it up on our YouTube channel, so the reach will be even larger in the future.
I can't even imagine what time it is in the Philippines.
Yes,
That's awesome.
it's the middle of the night for sure.
Wow.
We appreciate you being here, Professor Padata.
Yes, absolutely.
I don't mean to put you on the spot, but will you be attending the convention in
Oh,
Philadelphia?
me? Oh,
Yeah.
yes, I will be there.
Thank
Absolutely.
you.
Yeah,
Thank
I
you.
will absolutely be there. I'm looking forward to that. I look forward to seeing you and others there as well.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you so much. Well, in closing today, I would just like to thank Professor Johnson again for his wonderful presentation. Thank you, Professor Knox, for helping organize the speaker series. And thank you to all of our attendees from across the country and the globe. I would like to remind you all that we do have another event coming up on Friday, August 9th, featuring two faculty members from Virginia Commonwealth University, Deirdre Condit and Stephen Burkharth, and they will be speaking about how they launched their Pi Gamma Mu chapter. They were one of the most successful launches that we've had in recent years, so please mark your calendars for August 9th for that event. And thank you all again for attending, and thank you, Dr. Johnson.
Thank you. Thank you very
Thank
much. This was
you so
awesome.
much.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.